Hey everybody, how's it going? I'm coming to y'all with another book review, and this time we're looking at Dark Souls, Masque of Vindication by Michael A. Stackpole. And this, spoiler alert, is possibly the worst book that I've ever read. And when I say that, I don't necessarily mean like worst book of absolute all time, but since I've got back into reading as a hobby, yeah, this is easily the worst book that I've picked up so far, to the point that I couldn't even make myself finish it. Over the course of a month, over a month, hell, 2 months by this point, I have slogged through this book, and I was physically falling asleep while reading it. I got 21 chapters in, 160 pages in, more than halfway through the book, somewhere around 2/3 of the book. And I just could not give a damn. And to me, that is such a shame, because not only do I love the Dark Souls world and am a big fan of it, but the book started so strong and was so promising, and I've heard so much about Michael Stackpole's work that I was very excited to jump into it. So I went into this book hopeful for multiple reasons, and the first few chapters delivered. To some degree. It started out so interestingly. We have this guy, mysterious guy, who's laid to rest in a tomb somewhere, but this tomb is like magically sealed with all sorts of different runes and sigils. And then some grave robbers who are getting a little too greedy they break him out, and he ends up having to slaughter them all in order to survive. And he absorbs their souls into himself, and it gives him the memories of these people. And that is such a cool way, or at least some of the memories of these people, and that is such a cool damn way to incorporate the Souls mechanic from the Dark Souls games into the novel. I love seeing stuff like that on video game tie-in series, how they manage to take mechanics and incorporate them into the world. That is, or into the actual, how it should be, or how it would play out, where the story real. I find that fascinating, and that was such a good start. And then, our character goes wandering for a little bit, and he sees this guy whose legs are fused together because he's sitting cross-legged at a bonfire. And when he approaches, they have a conversation, and he learns a little more about this world, and notices this bonfire doesn't give off heat, but, rather a sense of comfort and security. And, whenever he dies, he finds himself back at this bonfire. So again, we're incorporating Dark Souls mechanics in a really, really cool way. And then this man sitting there, unable to move himself and never wants to, gives our main character the Estus Flask so that he can heal himself. Okay, cool. We have some cool Dark Souls lore. And from that point forward, absolutely nothing about this damn book resembles Dark Souls in any shape, way, form, or fashion. Not the world, not the characters, not the tone of anything. It just doesn't feel like Dark Souls at freaking all. And that is such a damn shame, because not only should a tie-in book obviously understand and emulate the world it's tying into, but it started with so much promise. But no, instead we get a generic buddy adventure kind of story. We have a small traveling party, and they pick up new members as they go, all of which were sealed away behind some kind of magical barrier with a puzzle, which, again, does not feel very Dark Souls at all. And there's some hidden purpose behind one guy who's actually not an undead. He's still alive, and he was sealed away, and he's like this prince or something, and none of it feels like Dark Souls, even remotely. We're talking about characters traveling and joking together, and, going from one town to the next, completing missions for people, in a world that is supposed to be the most grimdark that ever grimdarked. I have never found, except for maybe Berserk, and that's arguable, a fantasy setting that is darker and grimmer and more true to the definition of grimdark than Dark Souls. Okay, we are talking about a world where most people are dead and their souls aren't even able to move on because they're forever trapped to repeat their lives as undead soldiers working aimlessly, until maybe someone who happened to be gifted with a little more potential comes along and slaughters them for good. But even then, they don't get to move on to an afterlife because their souls are absorbed into the individual for their knowledge, So he can literally use them as currency. Yeah, souls are currency in this world, which means murder is the basis of the economy. That is how dark we are talking. That is how grim we are talking. And all those who are alive and undead are nothing more than playthings to, ridiculously powerful beings who consider themselves gods and consider themselves above everybody. That is the world that Dark Souls is set in. There is no hope, there is no light, there is no happy ending, and even in the games when our main characters would, defeat the big bad of the game, it didn't change a damn thing. The cycle repeated anyways. We are talking about the darkest damn fantasy setting that I've ever found to exist. One that makes A Song of Ice and Fire and The Witcher all seem like happy-go-lucky, Hobbit-style fairy tales. Love those stories, but they don't compare to how dark the Dark Souls world is. I mean, it's horrific stuff. Does that come through in this book? No, absolutely not. We got characters traveling together and making jokes and, just sharing in good company and, oh, look, here's a new thing for us to overcome. We better overcome it. It doesn't feel at all like Dark Souls. Not even slightly. But even worse than that, it doesn't even feel like a good fantasy story. It is so generic, but it couldn't even feel like a decently engaging generic fantasy story for a number of reasons. Okay, so for one, I mentioned it doesn't feel anything like Dark Souls, but you need to have Dark Souls knowledge to understand many things that are happening in the book. Like the Estus Flask isn't explained, these time shifts are not explained, there's all sorts of stuff that is not explained in this book. But if you play Dark Souls, you'd know what they are. So it's a book that doesn't sit well as a Dark Souls fan, but it requires Dark Souls knowledge, so people who aren't Dark Souls fans can't enjoy it either. The storytelling is just super generic and soulless, no pun intended. It makes me physically angry, and when I was reading it, it was making me physically sleepy. Okay, I'm talking, I was literally falling asleep while reading this book, and I did actually fall asleep reading this book twice, okay? Twice, despite going into it with fairly high energy. It's not like I was reading this book at the end of a long day, to settle down. I'm talking middle of the day, kicking back, reading this book, falling asleep in my chair. And if it sounds like I'm being super harsh on this book and you enjoyed this book, hey, more power to you. If you liked this book, I love that for you, but this is my review, and I didn't. The first few chapters were the only part about this book that I liked. Everything else, honestly, I teetered between complete lack of any kind of feeling towards the book to even hating the book because it was such a soul-sucking slog to try to work my way through. And after a certain point, when it put me in a slump where I didn't read hardly anything for 3 weeks, I finally said, you know what? No, this isn't worth it. I'm not going to put myself through this. I'm done. And I DNF'd it after 160 pages. Okay? 21 chapters in, I DNF'd this book. And again, I never DNF books. So, yeah, I mean, I've read Harry Potter and the Cursed Child to completion. No problems. I read Magic the Gathering War of the Spark to completion. No problems. And you'll see my reviews on those books, or if you're on my Goodreads, you can go read my reviews of those books. They did not review well. But I could finish them. I couldn't finish Dark Souls Masque of Vindication. And yeah, I'm literally telling you it is worse than Cursed Child. That is my God-honest opinion. Speaking as someone who loves fantasy books and who loves the Dark Souls world, this is just a painfully boring, slow, soulless, generic waste of time. Am I going to keep the book? Yes, because I'm going to try to force myself to finish the remaining chapters one day. Gotta try to make myself do it. And maybe, just maybe, I'll do a re-review once I do, because maybe that'll bring my opinion of it up, or maybe even down a little bit. But, as it sits, you can consider this video part 1, I guess. If I ever finish it, I'll make a part 2. But read literally anything else. I've got a copy of The Fifth Sorceress laying around that I might read. I got it because I heard it was like the worst book of all time, and I'm going to try to read that, and maybe that'll take the place of worst book I've ever read. Maybe it won't. Who's to say? That'll be fun to find out. But for now, this is easily the worst book that I have ever read in my entire life. So no, I do not recommend reading it. It was a complete waste of time. Pick up literally any damn thing else. Alright, so I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and I will see you next time. Peace.